This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Napoleon of Notting Hill by G.K. Chesterton. Section 8, Book 3, Chapter 2. The Remarkable Mr. Turnbull. After two more interviews with shopmen, however, the patriot's confidence in his own psychological diplomacy began vaguely to wane. Despite the care with which he considered the peculiar rationale and the peculiar glory of each separate shop, there seemed to be something unresponsive about the shopmen. Whether it was a dark resentment against the uninitiate for peeping into their Masonic magnificence, he could not quite conjecture. His conversation with the man who kept the shop of curiosities had begun encouragingly. The man who kept the shop of curiosities had indeed enchanted him with a phrase. He was standing drearily at the door of his shop, a wrinkled man with grey, pointed beard, evidently a gentleman who had come down in the world. "And how does your commerce go, you strange guardian of the past?" said Wayne affably. "Well, sir, not very well," replied the man with that patient voice of his class, which is one of the most heartbreaking things in the world. "Things are terribly quiet." Wayne's eyes shone suddenly. "A great saying," he said, "worthy of a man whose merchandise is human history. Terribly quiet. That is, in two words, the spirit of this age as I have felt it from my cradle. I sometimes wondered how many other people felt the oppression of this union between quietude and terror. I see blank, well-ordered streets, and men in black moving about inoffensively, sullenly. It goes on day after day, day after day, and nothing happens. But to me it is like a dream from which I might wake screaming. To me the straightness of our life is the straightness of a thin cord stretched tight. Its stillness is terrible. It might snap with a noise like thunder, and you who sit amid the debris of the great wars, you who sit, as it were, upon a battlefield, you know that war was less terrible than this evil peace. You know the idle lads who carried those swords under Francis or Elizabeth, the rude squire or baron who swung that mace about in Picardy or Northumberland battles, may have been terribly noisy, but were not, like us, terribly quiet. Whether it was a faint embarrassment of conscience as to the original source and date of the weapons referred to, or merely an ingrained depression, the guardian of the past looked, if anything, a little more worried. "But I do not think," continued Wayne, "that this horrible silence of modernity will last, though I think for the present it will increase. What a farce is this modern liberality! Freedom of speech means practically, in our modern civilization, that we must only talk about unimportant things. We must not talk about religion, for that is illiberal. We must not talk about bread and cheese, for that is talking shop. We must not talk about death, for that is depressing. We must not talk about birth, for that is indelicate. It cannot last. Something must break this strange indifference, this strange dreamy egoism, this strange loneliness of millions in a crowd. Something must break it. Why should it not be you and I? Can you do nothing else but guard relics?" The shopman wore a gradually clearing expression, which would have led those unsympathetic with the cause of the Red Lion to think that the last sentence was the only one to which he had attached any meaning. "I am rather old to go into a new business," he said, "and I don't quite know what to be, either." "Why not?" said Wayne, gently, having reached the crisis of his delicate persuasion. "Why not be a colonel?" It was at this point, in all probability, that the interview began to yield more disappointing results. The man appeared inclined at first to regard the suggestion of becoming a colonel as outside the sphere of immediate and relevant discussion. A long exposition of the inevitable war of independence coupled with the purchase of a doubtful 16th century sword for an exaggerated price, seemed to resettle matters. Wayne left the shop, however, somewhat infected with the melancholy of its owner. That melancholy was completed at the barber's. "Shaving, sir?" inquired the artist from inside his shop. "War," replied Wayne, standing on the threshold. "I beg your pardon?" said the other sharply. "War," said Wayne warmly, "but not for anything inconsistent with the beautiful and the civilized arts. War for beauty, war for society, war for peace. A great chance is offered you of repelling that slander which, in defiance of the lives of so many artists, attributes poltroonery to those who beautify and polish the surface of our lives. Why should not hairdressers be heroes? Why should not—" "Now you get out," said the barber irascibly. "We don't want any of your sort here. You get out." And he came forward with the desperate annoyance of a mild person when enraged. Adam Wayne laid his hand for a moment on the sword, then dropped it. "Notting Hill," he said, "will need her bolder sons." And he turned gloomily to the toy shop. It was one of those queer little shops so constantly seen in the side streets of London, which must be called toy shops only because toys upon the whole predominate, for the remainder of goods seem to consist of almost everything else in the world: tobacco, exercise books, sweet stuff, novelettes, halfpenny paper clips, halfpenny pencil sharpeners, bootlaces, and cheap fireworks. It also sold newspapers, and a row of dirty-looking posters hung along the front of it. "I am afraid," said Wayne as he entered, "that I am not getting on with these tradesmen as I should. Is it that I have neglected to rise to the full meaning of their work? Is there some secret buried in each of these shops which no mere poet can discover?" He stepped to the counter with a depression which he rapidly conquered as he addressed the man on the other side of it, a man of short stature and hair prematurely white and the look of a large baby. "Sir," said Wayne, "I am going from house to house in this street of ours, seeking to stir up some sense of the danger which now threatens our city. Nowhere have I felt my duty so difficult as here, for the toy shop keeper has to do with all that remains to us of Eden before the first wars began. You sit here meditating continually upon the wants of that wonderful time when every staircase leads to the stars, and every garden path to the other end of nowhere. Is it thoughtlessly, do you think, that I strike the dark old drama peril in the paradise of children? But consider a moment. Do not condemn me hastily. Even that paradise itself contains the rumour or beginning of that danger, just as the Eden that was made for perfection contained the terrible tree. For judge childhood even by your own arsenal of its pleasures. You keep bricks. You make yourself thus doubtless the witness of the constructive instincts older than the destructive. You keep dolls. You make yourself the priest of that divine idolatry. You keep Noah's arks. You perpetuate the memory of the salvation of all life as a precious and irreplaceable thing. But do you keep only, sir, the symbols of this prehistoric sanity, this childish rationality of the earth? Do you not keep more terrible things? What are those boxes, seemingly of lead soldiers, that I see in that glass case? Are they not witnesses to that terror and that beauty, that desire for a lovely death which could not be excluded even from the immortality of Eden? Do not despise the lead soldiers, Mr. Turnbull." "I don't," said Mr. Turnbull of the toy shop shortly, but with great emphasis. "I am glad to hear it," replied Wayne. "I confess that I feared for my military schemes the awful innocence of your profession. How, I thought to myself, will this man, used only to the wooden swords that give pleasure, think of the steel swords that give pain? But I am at least partly reassured. Your tone suggests to me that I have at least the entry of a gate of your fairyland, the gate through which that soldiers enter. For it cannot be denied, I ought, sir, no longer to deny, that it is of soldiers that I come to speak. Let your gentle employment